will begin. So friends, welcome. My name is Stephen Fetter. I manage the United in Learning program for the General Counsel Office, and it is my privilege and delight to kind of be your host as we gather one more time. Eric was reminding me that next month is our 2-year anniversary, which still boggles the mind. But this community of treasurers and finance people has helped keep the church afloat through the pandemic and beyond. And we are so grateful for your work and for your attention and for you continuing to come back month after month after month to pick the brains of our experts and enhance the ministry of God in the setting where you are serving. So thank you. Thank you for the ministry you offer and for your attention as we gather one more time. A couple of technical things, and then I'll turn things over to Eric. First of all, we will be using the chat in Zoom to collect our questions. We'll also be using the chat in YouTube, and I have copies of both of those available in front of me on the computer. My job in this team is to read the chat and to curate the questions and to pose them to our presenters at appropriate stopping points. So if we get 3 different people asking the same question, I'll probably only pose it once. I'll do my best to capture everything you ask. And if I miss something, put it in again. I'm only human. But we do try to collect your questions that way. We've got 176 on the line now, so we can't just open the mics and have a free-for-all. And you may have noticed I've muted everybody's mic so that we don't interrupt each other. Please leave your mic muted, and we'll use the chat to communicate that way. But having said that, the chat can sometimes fly. And my recommendation to you is that if it's distracting, ignore it. Use it to talk to me and don't bother reading it. If you can read and listen at the same time, great. But if it starts to pull your attention away from the speakers, listen to them. They're the people you came to hear. You will notice that I have turned on the live transcription. That's for people who have difficulty hearing and find it easier if the words appear on the screen. But I understand that it is distracting. It sure is. And for those of you who don't want it, move your mouse over top of the Zoom window where all of our pictures are in the PowerPoint and so on. Down at the bottom, you'll see the ribbon of commands come up, and the one on the right has 3 little dots and the word more. That's where they hide all of the commands that don't fit on the ribbon. And one of those under the more button says hide subtitles. So if you don't want the words at the bottom of your screen, you can hide the subtitles. And my apologies to the folks at YouTube, you cannot hide the subtitles. That Zoom just sends them over there and you don't have the choice. So if you really find it distracting, come and join us in Zoom, and the link is at the United in Learning website and you can find it there. If you have other questions, by all means, put a note in the chat. Helen, if you're on a laptop or a desktop computer, again, that more button should give you the options around live transcription, so you can go and have a look at that. If it hasn't defaulted to on, you can go and find it there. If you have other technical questions, please put them in the chat and I'll try to respond there as I'm able. If they're sort of just questions that pertain to you only, you can send me a direct message rather than sort of interrupt the flow of the conversation that way. And I'm going to turn things over to Eric, who is our primary presenter tonight. So, Eric, over to you. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. And at some point, I'd like to, when Clyde's talking, I'm going to turn on the transcription just to see if it picks up his voice and words really well. I've seen some pretty funny things happen with transcription. Anyway, we're looking to, again, give you the most current news. And let me just get started here. We always start with the creed and remind ourselves that this treasurer and finance committee community and trustee community, that this is our ministry to free everyone else up from some of that true headaches that the compliance function can throw at us. So I always include the creed, as you know. But I'd also like to start with a quick land acknowledgement. And I've had a few friends, Indigenous friends, tell me that they're starting to wonder, they're seeing these land acknowledgements everywhere, but they kind of roll off really fast, get them out of the way. And, they're saying, gee, are people still listening? And so I'm going to put more emphasis on the second part of my and Clyde's Toronto land acknowledgement here. And we in Toronto acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And we have to keep reminding ourselves to be grateful for the opportunity to live and work here. And we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. This recognition must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. So with that, what are we going to cover tonight? A wee bit of new government news. It's not coming out as fast and furious as it once did, and I'm going to say thank God for that. We are including, I have like 2 slides on it, but we are including another deck that people have been asking for. There's been a fair bit of interest in new treasurers, particularly around handling GST and HST rebates. So there's an entire separate presentation deck that's going to be part of your click through there on the United Learning website when the recording is up. So there's going to be 2 decks, the one I'm presenting now, plus one on GST, HST. We'll also, this is the time of year where we're asking folks to get their statistics in. I selfishly and just for the good of the church, I'm really looking to see how we did in 2021. We know how we did in 2020. Anecdotally, I don't think we took the same kind of hit that we did in 2020, but we need those statistics. And of course, those statistics also drive things like assessment and frankly, informed decision-making about all kinds of ways that we could or should be, what we should be focusing on or how we can better serve our ministries across the country. Got some news on the insurance side. A number of things that we're working on to improve, whether it's payroll service or getting folks to, credit cards. We've talked a little bit about that, and we've got a fair number of questions. But just before we start that, I just want to say I do want to have a happy birthday shout out to my life partner of over 40 years, Lori Young, who is at a birthday celebration dinner with my kids a few miles from here. And that's where I'm headed next. So one thing we thought we might try tonight, and frankly, I ran out of time in terms of setting it up, but also I want to collect better detail. So we're going to be reaching out to you. All kinds of treasurers are asking, hey, what bookkeeping systems do you use? What church management software? How are you handling Interact, credit cards, facilities? So we're going to turn that into, I'm going to do an email broadcast with some form of SurveyMonkey or something to be able to collect the data and literally be looking for information around everything from which systems you use. Later on we'll start building up a network around what you think of them, and maybe have more people equipped to help each other out. So that's the goal. It is not for the sake of collecting information. And rather than ask just this crowd, you 200 to 300 treasurers, are pretty regular here, and I tend to think of you as the early adopters and the ones that are really up on what's going on. My target with some of this is the other folks. So anyway, in terms of new federal announcements, the hardest hit business initiative has been extended a month. It was from February 12 now to March 12. There's still the Canada Recovery Hiring Program, which replaced the CEWS or wage subsidy, and that doesn't apply to most of us, as I've said before. So tomorrow is a deadline for CEWS. If you're still processing your wage subsidy application, tomorrow is 6 months after period 19. So we don't go through the calculations anymore. I think I've got 1 or 2 people who've emailed me about joining this party a little late, but we'll get them the information separately. Okay, the loan program, you saw this slide, but both the CEBA loan, announcement, it was announced last month, but it's the deadline, the interest-free period has been extended to December 31st, 2023. That's a date you don't want to miss. And we've done the same thing with United Church COVID loans. The difference is the CEBA loans are over. You've either got one or you don't. The United Church loans, even if you've repaid it, you could reopen it up again. However, the interest-free bonus and the grant at the end, that's a one-time. You can't just sort of. I think you can all appreciate that. That kind of makes sense. But those loans are available throughout this year, and then interest-free through 2023, just like the CEBA loans. Okay, the hardest hit business program, this is the one that was originally announced, I think, for a month and extended, and it's been extended a couple of months now. It didn't, it needed 50% revenue drops, which, for the most part, I was saying, check it out, but it probably doesn't affect us. However, they have announced changes which reduce the threshold for now from December through March to if you were closed, at least half the time or closed entirely, it was a 25% revenue reduction that basically would be factored into the calculation. And it was expressly stated that charities were eligible. So I've had a number of folks who, again, it's the same worksheets that we've been doing for the CEWS program, the wage subsidies. I've had a number of folks who have had, have achieved grants, not huge amounts anymore, not like the wage subsidies, the original wage subsidies, but definitely worth a look. And again, here's just some more information on the specific changes. It's looking at current month losses. It's potentially something for you to check out if you have had, a significant revenue drop compared to your historical numbers, and it is based now on the 50% closure as well. So again, for most of us now, this isn't applicable, but you do need to check your specific situation just in case it is. Okay, I'm going to talk about a couple of Ontario things. We're a national. This is a national offering, but 5 or 6 of our regions, I guess 5 anyway, touch Ontario, and we happen to have knowledge for sure on a couple of grant programs. The business cost rebate program relates to any time closed, and in Ontario we've been at 50% closures for most of this time. So churches, it does apply starting from December 19th, and I think the end dates will probably be next week. I think we're opening up in Ontario, so it's all online. The web link is here and available to you if you get a printed copy, or I don't know if anyone wants to paste it in the chat, but don't worry about that. It is a program that many churches have used successfully, and a lot of provincial programs, not just in Ontario, weren't available to churches, either because they needed to be incorporated or some reason like that. Okay, there's one other grant program for Ontario folks, and you might have something like this in your province. I've invited people to let me know. I do get a variety of briefing services, but I haven't seen specific grant programs like this. And this particular one is it funds security and safety measures and has a deadline of March 3rd. I've had this on the website of Ontario regional councils now for a few weeks, I think, but just flagging it here in case anyone missed it. These are the kind of measures that you might want to do anyway, but there's a funding program because of some of the vandalism and hateful stuff that we've read about in the news. So something to check out for Ontario. For other provinces, if there is something that someone wants to flag in the chat, I can make sure to get the word out more broadly. The Ontario program, as I say, was very intentionally includes places of worship this time. And there are calculations for energy and, for building use. The whole notion, one of the questions we had was, well, hold on, we closed, but we continue to offer online services. And I don't think that's a distinction that's being made. Some place, whether you're a restaurant or all kinds of other things, you're still offering your product in a different way, but you've been impacted dramatically. So I've encouraged people to, claim the full square footage of their building and, meet the criteria. Everything's online and streamlined enough that it isn't too much work. This isn't nearly the same work that it is for the queues where you needed to collect all your historical information and so on. So that's the news on the programs and so on. Not too much new, and with any luck, winding up. Not that I want to see financial supports go, but I do want to see COVID go. I guess they go together.
So Eric, just before you leave that, just so I can ask the questions in context, a couple of questions about the grants that you're talking about. Michael says the Ontario Business Cost Rebate Program, according to my reading, religious services weren't subject to capacity limits in the latest lockdown. So how are we eligible?
Well, they were subject to a 50% capacity, which was the criteria that I saw. You will get a prorated calculation from that, but it was 50% that I think it was enough to trigger eligibility.
Thank you.
I am aware of quite a number of churches that have gotten something.
Sure, thank you. Laura says for the anti-hate security measures grant, they want a land title. Does parcel registry from the land registry office work in the same way? Land titles are complicated to find.
Well, I think what I've always seen used is just there is in Ontario typically, even though there's no tax, the municipality typically offers a statement and a roll number type thing that can be used. Certainly, my own church has that. I know.
Sure. Folks in the chat acknowledging that churches became subject to the 50% reduction, but that a lot of the 100% reduction in meeting space. So if there are spaces that are dedicated to meetings, that would also trigger the grant. Yeah. One other person was asking about a CEBA loan forgiveness and how that works. That's something you've talked about in many webinars, but have you got a sentence you can just share?
Sure. Basically, I mean, you are to have used the money to pay expenses, or at least notionally. If that's the case, basically, if you had a $40,000 loan, you need to repay $30,000 by December of 2023. If you had a $60,000 loan, you need to repay $40,000. And either way, if you do, that wipes out the loan. That's basically intended to close out the loan. I haven't seen exactly how you would signal that online. They probably haven't set it up yet, but that's the notion. If you make that payment, the rest is forgiven.
And so when you record it, it was that weird accounting procedure where you had to record it in the first year.
That's right. So, and Clyde set us straight on this, but basically, even though you didn't get the grant, the 10,000 grant, if it was a $40,000 loan, it depends when you took it, but you're notionally to have recorded the grant as income in the year you got the loan. And I think Clyde's always explained, I've called it goofy from the get-go, but Clyde's explained to me that this is the government's way of, if for taxable entities, getting some of it back.
Sure. Bob Ward is wanting to be referred to instructions on how to apply for these programs because he's just coming on as a new treasurer and the old one didn't. We could probably refer him to past webinars, but I'm not sure which one would be best. You have that off the top of your head?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, we can sit there and pick webinars, but I think the first test, a lot of dates have passed and certain things aren't eligible. So if you could just pick up my email from the end of the session and just email me with, what your starting point is or what you were thinking about or what your circumstance is. It's, as we noted earlier, for example, there's 23, I'm blanking now, but periods of say wage subsidy, and period 19 expires tomorrow. So even if you're interested in wage subsidy belatedly, you've got a bit of a hill to climb, but it's not insurmountable. But let's find out what you've got.
Perfect. Thanks. That's it, Eric. Thank you for letting me stop you.
Okay. So folks, this is Gst Hst. There's about a 20 or 25 slide deck with sample forms and some of the principles. I have 2 slides here just as reference and to point you there. One is the whole notion of, does a church have to register for Gst Hst? And for every single one of you on this call, the answer should be no, you should not be a GST registrant. You should just be claiming, you should be a charity that claims a charity rebate. If you're a registrant, then you're claiming input credits and doing all kinds of other things. And you don't have to do that, and you qualify, for rebates anyway. So just to make that point, that there's this whole definition of taxable supplies, but basically the things that most charities do, including rent their space, are not subject to HST. So you generally shouldn't be charging HST for much of anything. And it changes the rules if you do register. So I say 99.9. I have helped a couple of churches deregister, actually. So that's a key point. The second key point, you're not HST registrants. You don't have to collect HST on any transactions in the normal course of church type business. You can claim twice a year. And I always say claim right away, because as soon as you got the numbers, because it's cash in the door coming back. If you haven't been filing, and there were literally hundreds of churches that weren't when I started doing these webinars, you can go back 4 years. And I think Clyde would tell me that to file sort of 6 months at a time, but you can go back 4 years if you had to start. Again, I'm making this point, churches are charities, but not HST registrants. That also means that you don't pay HST on leases, or if you're buying real estate. If you're selling real estate, it depends who you sell to. And there is a guide for that. So again, we take you right through the GST accounting and how to calculate it and track it and what forms to fill in, and all of that is in a separate webinar. Okay, completing the T3010 annual charitable return. Because it's that time of year, I've left this in, but we did about 10 slides last month. And in last month's, in the January package, you have a full line by line, form by form walkthrough of the T3010 as well. So here I'm just flagging two things. On page 1 is these technicalities around the fact that there's one incorporated entity, and our congregations and our regional councils are internal divisions of this nationally incorporated body. And this, these are the numbers you fill in. Most of you will know all that already. The top tips and reminders, again, I used to say, I know I'm not supposed to say this, but I used to say that it's way more important to file it on time than it was for it to be correct. You really should make it correct too, but like this, if you miss the deadline, you can go into, sort of a bureaucratic mess, and you'd be subject to $500 fines and all kinds of things. Okay, make sure your business account is current and accessible. Even if you're not using your My Business account to file your T3010, and by the way, I do recommend for folks that are comfortable uploading forms and stuff to do that. But even if you're snail mailing, make sure that you can still go into your account to check the status. You can go into your account to make a routine little change the same way you might on your own income tax. Boy, did we learn this lesson the hard way. Do not put end dates on your T1235. Okay, if someone has not resigned or died, okay, if they are still a trustee or still a board member, there is no end date to their service. And do not report anything on a T1236 unless it's an active charity or qualified donee, for a couple of reasons. A, because you can't give money to organizations that aren't, but reporting it, but then just reporting it makes it worse, because you're basically saying, come and get me. So make sure your tax receipts are compliant. That has to do with having the website on there, and the CRA has a nice what is a standard tax receipt. I will make the distinction there. You're all used to issuing tax receipts at least once a year, and we might have a separate session someday on gift in kind. Again, we've talked about that a fair bit over the years. And again, just in case you missed point number 1, point number 6 is file on time, whatever you do. And then there was, this was one of the questions asked, again, the accounting for federal monies. Okay, so you're going to account for all your, your queues, remaining queues, probably in 2021. We talked a little bit about how to account for the goofy loan accounting on the CEBA loans. Federal grants, that's queues, federal grants of these other kinds, including the CEBA notional forgiveness, all go on line 4540. Anything from other charities like Canada Helps goes on line 4510. And I think most treasurers like to get this out of the way, but don't sort of set it aside and say, oh, I'll deal with it in May. Try to get it out of the way right after you do your statistics. So I'll just got a little placeholder there for any questions, but that was a bit more of a refresh.
Yep, no, it is. Somebody taking issue with the goofy accounting. Can you just sort of remind us again why we claim that forgiveness in the first year of the loan instead of the year when we've proven that we paid back the rest of it?
You know what? Maybe Clyde wants to take a shot at it. It's goofy accounting. I understand. The only logic I can understand is that if you were a taxable entity, reporting your income earlier basically gets you taxed back earlier. Clyde, can you do better than that?
That's exactly the reason that I received when I was asking CRA about it. And the thing is that it's a CRA requirement to get the loan. They said right at the beginning that this is the way it had to be accounted for. And so we just have to follow suit. I don't agree with it. I don't know very many people that do. We do all agree with Eric's assessment of it. Yeah. It's goofy when it comes to accounting.
And, again, we're telling you what to do. The odds of people being able to find this on a CRA charity directorate filings is low as far as I'm concerned. But let's do it. We got to use this money. It is taxpayer money. And I think, you know, we could and should be respectful of that.
One other comment on the CEBA loan. I know a number of churches that have actually taken that money when they received it, set it aside in a GIC. And that is really leaving a gray area for the fact that you were supposed to be using it. Especially so when they've got the date their check was cashed or it was deposited in your account, and within a couple of days you take out a GIC for exactly the same amount.
Yeah, that's definitely a red flag.
Yeah, and I would be very cautious about reporting things like that. Make sure that you've used it or can prove that you've used the equivalent of it.
And again, folks, not to be too alarmist, it's normal to, in cash management, to put some money you don't need in GICs, but if you received it the same day and put it in a GIC, it doesn't look like it's adhering to the intent or spirit of the program. So we've talked about this at great length. So I'm hoping there's no one out there that's furrowing a brow at the moment. Okay, anything else?
Little bit of chit chat back and forth, but people are kind of answering each other's questions. One person says we signed up to have our assessment automatically withdrawn in November 2021, but it hasn't happened yet. Receipt of the form has been acknowledged, but you still haven't taken the money. So is there something else this person needs to do, or is it just work it out itself over time?
I'm going to say send me an email. You know, it could be something that's fallen through the cracks, but I certainly know that we took all kinds of pre-authorized deductions. The first scheduled payment would be would have been February 1st if you were on the monthly plan. And just flip me an email, and if there has been a glitch, we'll catch it up.
Yeah. Somebody's talking, a couple of people are talking about the financial handbook, which is online. Somebody says, is it possible to get a hard copy of that?
We've sold out and haven't reprinted, but it's also on my list of things to rewrite and update.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the last few years we've just been doing webinars. So right now we've been saying no to that.
Yeah, and my advice to you, if you really, really, really want it in paper, download the PDF and send it over to Staples or somebody like that, and they will print it for you.
Yeah, no, that'll work.
It's going to be rewritten, and I mean the advantage of having it in a PDF reader is that you can search it.
That's right.
That's a huge advantage.
Yeah, but definitely you don't want to be downloading it every time if you have a slow internet or something. I always just dropped it on my local directory and did it that way.
Sure. One question about GST, HST, just confirm, if we hold a theater or a concert event, we don't have to charge HST on those ticket sales?
Definitely not.
Okay.
If you're not registered for GST, then you definitely don't have to charge it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have charged it, you have to report it if you've collected any. But if you haven't collected it, and don't start.
And we're not required to collect it because we're not required to register.
Mhm.
I think that's those questions that have come in. So thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to put in a plug. I happen to know at least Susan Jackson and probably Rose Camborne, who's our CRA help desk, and our two lead assessment people are I think on this webinar. So I need to make sure I put in a plug here for getting your statistics in. Is it a chore? Oh, yes, it is. You know, most churches have you know, certain of the categories of stuff is, you know, split out with 3 or 4 different people handling them, and it is it can be a chore. But the sooner we get that information, what's in it for you is we can, you know, get you already your assessment number for next year, which is kind of an important thing, you know, nice lead time and so on. But it also informs a tremendous amount about just trying to figure out how we collectively have come through COVID. So as I said, as soon as you submit your stats, you get your 2023 assessment. The first due date is February 1st, and should have happened. The individual, if something hasn't gone through their account, let me know. I got an asterisk there. If you were having a step increase in your assessment, we've got a computer glitch. So your total correct annual assessment is on the statement, but then we go and it's, the computer glitch basically looks to subtract from it. So with any luck, I was hoping that would be fixed even today, but most of you haven't submitted yet. We're rushing to fix that and make sure there's no confusion. A lot of this stuff is very much almost just-in-time programming as we, we're implementing newer and faster systems a little faster than we should be. Okay, and this is a reminder of how to get there. This is on Church Hub. You should every treasurer should have a Church Hub account and password, and this is how you can go get your reports. Key is the statistics year or assessment year. There is a lag because it takes us the better part of a year to get everybody's stats in, and then we roll those forward. Your invoice for the year is there. Payments will be updated on there. Your target assessment for 2023. And frankly, most of the folks on this webinar, the regulars, all know this. So that's what your, I'm using Foothills Pastoral Charge, but this is what your Church Hub looks like, and you don't get all those windows. It's all customized by and has considerable security based on user profile. So there's if you're a search committee, there's security all around that, and you can have as many search committee IDs as you need to do your work, but no one else gets to see the stuff that you get to see because of the confidential nature of that. And for more information, this is the link explaining how our assessment process works, how we came to it with the remits and the restructuring of the church effective 2019, online authorization forms for remitting assessment or going to PAR or even sending things electronically. So that was assessment.
Again, a lot of people who are talking back and forth and answering each other's questions in the chat. So I'm not sure that I need to do that.
This is great. If I can eventually just remove myself entirely, I can go to my wife's birthday party.
There we go. Well, I'm trying to keep the questions to a minimum.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, well, listen, if folks are answering themselves, I'm going to turn it over. We're featuring a couple of our, our regulars, but also people who asked some great questions. The first, Clyde's going to take over here. The first batch are some questions that Clyde was just answering in the last day or two from Jane Brooks out in BC. And then we're going to, from Collingwood, we're going to hear from another one of our longtime treasurers. Clyde, take it away.
Thank you. And Jane Brooks, the conversation goes on because I answered one of her emails just about 10 minutes before I came online with for tonight, just further up to this, but questions like the who's responsible or who can sign tax receipts. In theory, anybody can sign them. However, my own feeling is that they should be authorized by the official governance body of your congregation, only so that there is something that says they're authorized to sign the form. They do not have to show up in the T1235, and they do not have to be somebody that has access to your My Business account. It's just a simple matter of authorizing them. The church treasurer is really responsible for it, but they can delegate it. And so I don't know many treasurers that sign them. I like to think that a envelope secretary will be able to sign the receipts because that person is the only one that knows what the details are. And they can sign and say, we've done this according to what we've got available. So I think that's the best place to go with that. The CRA retention requirement, their requirement is 6 years plus the current. In a lot of places, they look at 7-year turnover. And after 7 years, you can destroy things. Yes, your donation envelopes now need to be kept that way. A few years back, we said it was only 2 years for the donation envelopes. And then because of a couple of audits that were done, and they had problems because somebody complained about the use of the funds and all this sort of thing, they decided that donation envelopes or equivalent have to be kept so that you've got a record of the donation, where it came from and how it was supposed to be used. The electronic way of doing things was not even thought of when these rules were put in place. But what I do is I print off the acknowledgement that I get from Interac that says the donation has been made. Because if the person wants it allocated not just to the general fund, but they want it broken out, they put that in that memo. So a good printout, a single page is all that's required, or you can put a file together electronically. You don't even need to print it. Electronic files are recognized as long as they're well done and properly done according to the standards that are in the CRA guidelines. So in my accounting system, I always cross-reference it with the transaction number. If you're getting e-transfers, you'll notice the transaction number is CA at the beginning. That's because it's coming from Canada, and then 6 characters. And those 6 characters are the important one, but they frequently only show you the last 3. At least you've got something to acknowledge that that transaction is in your books. So that's where I would look at for those 2 points. If we could flip the slide here to, there we go. Another question that Jane had, and I don't know whether Jane was a new treasurer or whether she's just one that thinks of new things at the beginning of each year. But in her situation, there was a 3-point charge that has moved in together on their finances. And 2 of the churches were capitalizing, or not capitalizing, sorry, had capital assets on their books. The third one didn't. And so she was asking questions about that, and where do you draw the limits at, and how do you know what to put in? Well, in a lot of places, and I suggested a figure of 5,000. That's just being a little facetious, as it says right there, that many of our churches wouldn't even spend that much money in a single shot. But if you know a little bit about what to capitalize, and that's long life things, usually it's anything that lasts more than 2 years, then you can break down the cost through amortization and stretch it out over many years to expense it. It's all a paper item. It's not a cash flow item. So it's not really important, but with the changes that are being made in the accounting field, if you have your books reviewed by a CPA, it's going to end up with capitalized or capital assets and amortization, because that is one of their requirements. So that's why we put a little bit into this time. Remember that that's not unusual to not be doing it in the smaller congregations. Most of them don't even use a balance sheet. They have purely an income and expense statement. But this is something that you can expect in the future. Well, I've just covered some of that point right there. You do need to know what the value of your assets are, though, whether you show them on your statements, regular statements or not, because you need them on the T3010. It asks what your building and land holdings are, and it asks what other capital items you're maintaining. Part of that is so that they can get a rough idea of whether you've got a lot of capital goods and you're not using all of them for charitable purposes. And now there is a line for reporting that, but sometimes they just look at them and say, oh, we're going to have to look into this a little more. So do your best to report what's there. try and get a fair market value on your building, but I would suggest you never drop the price. Always have it going up just a little bit every year. If anything, keep it the same if you don't want to increase it. But I've used the insurance valuation, which isn't necessarily the right one, but in a number of cases, it's been proven to be. So it depends on how it's all been reported. Be consistent. On to the next. GST rebates, we've already talked about them. They are not revenue. However, on the UCC statistics, they show up in the revenue section. And that's supposed to make sure that they get accounted for properly and acknowledge that they're not part of revenue when they're doing the calculations for their assessment. The proper way of showing it is to show the GST or HST, at least the portion that we can get back as an asset. And when you get it back from the government, then you put that into the bank and you clear your asset off. So you have a receivable there. The M&S collected, this again was already mentioned once tonight, but we've got questions on this on a number of occasions. It's a little bit of accrual accounting, even if you're using cash accounting. It wouldn't hurt to do this so that you've got the record all into the in 21 finances for how much you gave. Some churches don't record it that way, and they don't bother worrying about getting it in prior to February 1, which used to be a date that we had to have the prior year's M&S funds in. And then they wonder why the certificates that have been sent out recently never match their records.
Yeah.
So
just to say that's still the date.
oh, I'm not surprised. We get lots of questions about that. So do your best to get it recorded in the year in which it was donated, not only in your own books, but in the year in the submitting it to the national office. It helps. Investment policies, very important if you're going to get into investments and manage them. Your best place to get an investment policy set up to know what kind of a mix to go with is probably to use an investment advisor. And you can use them to help you put that together, but then it needs to be reviewed. And most churches that have one of these investment policies review it at least internally, if not with the advisor, annually. Some of them review it with the advisor annually, not that necessarily it changes, but it's at least looked at and can be justified against your risk tolerance. Each person that's on a My Business account should be listed on the T1235. Now, most of the time, the people that are on My Business account would be the treasurer and the chair of finance, and maybe one or two others, because I would recommend having 4 people minimum on there. But if they're trustees or other board members, governing body members, board, council, whatever you want to call them these days, they should all be listed. The CRA expects to have a list of about 9, maybe 18 at the most, but if you've got the others under trustees and board, why not list them all? I've never known them to refuse them, so put them on and make sure that that T1235 is filled out for everybody listed completely. Birth dates are important because they cannot use, in the charity side of things, they cannot use social insurance number. Otherwise, we'd be asking for that on there. And paying online, oh, that's for payments going to the United Church. DA for assessments and the M&S. Once you've made an online payment, send an email to them and let them know what it's the payment amounts for. It helps to clarify the accounting up front. External audit, sort of if you can. It depends on your situation. Some audits can run as much as $20,000, $25,000 each year. Is it worth it to you? Depending on how much your assets are in the church. And not counting the building, I'm looking more at the financial records. What's the turnover in dollars each year? The manual refers to an audit. When I questioned this a few years ago, the explanation I got back was that we're not telling everybody to go out and get an audit. We're using a lowercase a instead of a capital A. And that just blows my mind when I remember that one. Anyway, there's a number of places that think they need an audit, and it's not. It's a review, is probably what most of us would use. And if your dollar value is very low or your cash flow is very low, go with a notice to readers. And that today is referred to more as a compilation engagement. And they are relatively inexpensive, but I've still seen those running upwards to $5,000 as well. Your best way of doing it, if you can, is to get an internal person who understands the finances, knows how to look at a set of books, but has no position in your organization as a decision maker when it comes to the financial side of things, because that would be a conflict of interest in reviewing the material. Another way is, we tried once here in Toronto and it didn't fly too well, but I know in the Ottawa area, I believe it was, that they've had this happen where they had treasurers swap the books. You do mine and I'll do yours. Or somebody in the church would do that. And that works reasonably well. However, you've got to remember that you cannot have a review letter produced. A non-CPA like myself, like Eric, cannot sign a letter that says we've reviewed the books and they look good. And that's at least in Ontario. I'm not sure about the other provinces, but if it's not there already, it's probably coming.
Yeah, and Clyde, I'm just going to jump in a little bit. You've just been speaking to these changes here.
Yes.
And we said last month, and this generated a fair bit of buzz. This in other provinces too. This whole notion of well, who can put notes and so on. So I'm just going to jump here and share some slides from Doug Mitchell from Collingwood, and he is a professional accountant. And he says, Eric, you should remind folks that some of the stuff that you and Clyde say is not necessarily rules, but guidance. So he's arguing, and this is, again, we discussed the gray of this. It should be okay to have notes to a financial statement as long as it's clear that there's no opinion being expressed. Now, this isn't what the accountant, the accountants obviously would like to have all the business, and except not that many want church business anyway. And Doug argues that the CRA, he's even seen the CRA reject financial statements without notes. I've not seen that. But anyway, one of his in making his point, Doug is saying maybe we should call them comments, because the idea is to be helpful to the reader, and whether you put them at notes at the end of a financial statement or whether you write an essay as a financial report, part of our job is to help congregation members understand this stuff. Another reminder from Doug was that, and this is one that I've stressed a lot over the years, you're the one treasurer, folks. It doesn't matter if you've got a UCW treasurer, a cemetery treasurer, and a choir treasurer. There's only one as far as the CRA is concerned, and they're looking for consolidated reports that might, even though all the totals might add up to what's in the annual report, they might be chunked differently. So And just to close things off, Doug refuses to use the online tools for volunteer work where he's being asked for his social insurance number, to get the My Business account and stuff. And Doug and I just completely disagree. I said, Doug, take a pill. It is what it is. We need to move on. And but I want to share the different perspectives here. Things are moving quickly, and we're lucky to have Doug, and we're especially lucky to have Clyde, who's working with this stuff every day.
Thanks, Eric. I was going to get to that, and that synapses of that whole thing. As one accountant said to me, one that I use a lot for the work that I do, he says, if you do these reports and somebody doesn't like it at the accounting firm, what are they going to do?
Exactly.
Because they don't have the ability to fine anybody for doing something that they say you can't do. So it's, Doug is quite right. It's guidance.
Yeah, we might have just, again, we were reporting very faithfully, verbatim even, what the profession was saying.
Yep.
But not everyone listens to every word accountants say. I can tell you that, because I'm not one. So anyway, folks, this is a repeat slide in terms of budget approval. In terms of budget approvals and all that kind of governance-y stuff that we haven't had because we've been closed. The existing rules do give an extension to everything until June 30th. Let's all pray that COVID lets us get back to some degree of face-to-face decision making, and there'll be a need to have the congregation meetings and stuff that we used to think of as mandatory. And I'm just going to jump in here, Clyde. We talked about investments. I wanted to highlight the United Church Foundation guidance piece. The United Church Foundation helps connect congregations with some of our affinity investing programs, and a really nice educational piece on what to consider in having an investment policy. Just cautioning folks that everybody's been looking at this just almost zero returns on GICs, and I get lots of calls saying I want to invest in bank stocks, or I want to invest in equities. Very important to have that risk tolerance conversation. So that guide, you could just Google it. If you Googled United Church Foundation investment policy or something, this would come up. And even just the timing, right? The way the markets are right now, going in 1 week or another could create a very different result if you're changing over in policies. So one of the points I wanted to make here is if you receive stock gifts, best practice, almost all charities do this, sell it right away. The whole idea is that it's a gift that was intended to have a certain value. If it happens to be a stock that you own in your portfolio anyway, you could, you might reflect on that. But generally, you've got a pile of investments that have an investment policy, and if somebody suddenly shows up with some stock you've never heard of, even if it's great, don't spend any governance time making or even thinking about something outside of policy. Just sell it. So I'm looking to switch gears here,
Sure. Maybe before you do that, Eric, we should just pick up a couple of nitpicky questions that have come in around the stuff Clyde was talking about. The whole conversation around capitalizing expenses, and somebody seems to be right on the line. They've got a furnace that was $4,700 plus HST. Should they be capitalizing that?
Quite possibly, and especially if they've got a limit, say, of anything over $1,000. Yeah, because the furnace has a long life.
Yeah, the only reason not to, the only possible reason not to is if you had a $5,000 limit and it happened to be just a little below. Right. But otherwise it's a long life asset, and you should capitalize it.
Sure. Somebody says my business account and the T1235. They've got a private bookkeeper with a represent a client access. Do they need to be listed on that T1235 in order to sort of authorize their access to the My Business account, or is the rep
No, they
client
don't
enough?
need to be.
No.
They're authorized separately when they become a representative. There's a form that's signed by the board
So-
representatives.
So they don't go on the T1235 because they're not decision makers in the pastoral charge.
That's right.
Good, thank you. Somebody's coming from Alberta. They're using an Alberta credit union, the Alberta Treasury branches, and the United Church isn't listed as a creditor. They can't transfer money to you. Are you going to be offering that through more credit unions? How do they get you money?
Well, first and foremost, complain. No, I'm dead serious. Lots of credit unions, and I would have thought, frankly, the ATB, that's one of the bigger ones. I would have thought that they could accommodate that. I'll check with my people, but generally, credit unions can handle this.
Quick question: where on the T3010 do you put the building's fair market value?
It's in the asset area, and I don't remember the line number offhand. When you look at Schedule 6, under assets, it's about halfway down the list.
Yeah, and it says buildings and land, and I think it might be 4,600, but don't quote me. Yeah.
Somebody is talking about looking for the United Church of Canada. Often we leave out the. So if you're in the ATB and you've been searching for United Church of Canada with no definite article at the beginning, that may be why you're not finding it.
Yep.
But maybe your branch manager can help you with that one too. So that's straight out of the chat. Somebody says we never list the capital, the cost of our building on the T3010 because it belongs to the National Church. Is that good practice?
Short answer is no. Again, financially, the trustees are the beneficial owner unless or until a congregation ceases to exist. So, we are an odd beast. The United Church is legally, compliance-wise, structurally very unusual, but the properties. If you were building a church now, for however much, that would go on your balance sheet, and it's understandable why people would think that, but it all falls back to this trust model deed, and title is held by the trustees of XYZ United Church.
Thank you. Last question, and going right back up to holding on to documents. Do we need to retain a hard copy of tax receipts for 6 years, or is an electronic copy sufficient?
Electronic copy is sufficient.
Yeah, electronic is sufficient, and I think for tax receipts it's even 2 years, isn't it, Clyde? On the when they talk about paper, I always keep 6 anyway. But
everything has been changed to 6 years now.
Okay,
good. That's it from me, folks.
Okay, so this is a slide I've shown. About half the country is insured with an affinity program that some of my people work with, and it's the entire country has been facing extreme premium increases. So we've been going through an extended underwriting process. It's been taking a long time to get renewals and so on. I left this in small print because it's so annoying, but whether it doesn't matter what insurance company you're with, all of them now, including the UCC Protect program, have put in a COVID exclusion. And this was put in January 2021. Our policies did not have one previously. And this limits to some degree how much the policy will cover legal defense costs if we were ever sued for someone getting COVID. The advice continues to be that congregations can do their best effort, and by following all public health guidelines and so on. And so far, any litigation has always been against an entity as opposed to individuals, but we have had people express concern. So there isn't sort of full blanket coverage, if you will, in the event that there was a COVID suit, but there would be the initial response, there would be defense costs until it was determined that it was a pure COVID suit. And anyway, I'm not, I've left the legalese words in here because this is the state of the insurance industry. It has nothing to do with a particular insurer. It's actually the reinsurers across the world that have imposed this on everybody. So,
just a quick comment on that, Eric. If you do your due diligence, if this goes to a court case, they look at the due diligence. What have you done to actually try to mitigate the loss?
Mhm.
And even though it might be COVID, the insurance company may not cover you, but you might be able to win a case by getting it thrown out.
Oh, and there's all kinds of, there's Good Samaritan laws.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of things, but this is just an area where it's a worry for people.
Yep.
And the best we can offer is that there is some indirect coverage still under the directors and officers, and individuals aren't sued in this kind of situation, even when it comes to long-term homes and some of the stuff you read in the papers.
Yeah.
So we think, we certainly feel that the United Church has been very faithful in following public health guidelines and best practice. But I wanted to include it here, just and we'll make sure this kind of thing's on the website and so on as well. Cyber insurance, there were some questions on it. The renewal's coming up, first year where we've had congregations have had umbrella cyber insurance. We've had 2 claims so far, the ransomware type, where someone basically hacks you in, freezes your computer, you can't get any of your data. The service has been remarkable. As I say, there's an umbrella program covering all congregations. The congregation deductible is $2,500, and I'm negotiating right now for what I'm hoping will not be a huge premium increase. I've talked a little bit about this, and there was some chat last time, but I just want to say that the idea of self-insuring, and that is, sort of taking on more, first of all, funding it and taking on more risk is a very common approach. Schools, universities do it. All major religions do it in the States. The Catholics do it here in Canada. I'm really pursuing this vigorously. The numbers look very encouraging. There is a proposal coming, and if it's approved, big if, okay, there's 300 people. If it's approved, this is what it would deliver right now. It would be a 15% reduction to anyone whose renewal is happening in December. That's basically unwinding what happened last year. There'd be a 30% reduction for the next round for March, June, and September. And basically what we're saying is if we had this now, we would not have an increase this year, and we'd have a 15% reduction. And we're looking, that's for the existing people in the affinity program. The idea is to offer a similar comparable benefit for folks joining the program. We can't mandate everybody being in the same insurance program, but we can invite them. And the numbers doing this is quite compelling. It also potentially limits future increases to inflation, for example. And there's a big word at the bottom there, but this does entail putting up, frankly, a few $1 million to fund this structure. And we would, hope that the claims experience would continue to be what it has been. Our premiums have gone way up, even though our claims have not. And that's one of the reasons for trying to take control of this yourself. So I will be developing with the National Finance Committee and the executive a proposal that we anticipate going to General Counsel this summer. And if it does, we do anticipate some cost relief. And this is pretty significant for many of us, right? We pay thousands of dollars for insurance. So this is one of my pre-retirement projects. I want to go out having implemented this and having it be successful. Just closing up, the payroll team, we haven't talked about that tonight too much, but there are some specific service improvements coming in March that I will announce when they're live, but I'll give you a hint. We're hoping to take you off the phone with ADP to the extent that any of you have to do that. We're hoping to have email access, and our top people, Eileen and Hannah and others, our top people on the ADP team are going to have direct access to your data where you've authorized it. So instead of throwing you back in the phone queue, they'll be able to solve problems and stuff. And we anticipate the service is going to improve dramatically. So that is coming as well. And reminding you that it's my wife's birthday. Here are the for follow-up questions. Here's your contact information. And again, just to thank you all for what you do for the church. I can't say that enough. I thank treasurers every day. We have one of the biggest jobs in terms of both the breadth of responsibility and the complexity. And then we threw COVID on top. So it's just great that so many of you are supporting your local congregation the way you are. And we're dedicated to try to make that even a bit easier where we can. So that's it for me, and I jumped in on Clyde, but if there are any other last questions.
A couple of people have asked about insurance renewals, and they're just not getting them in a timely way.
No, that is a statement of fact. One of the things that's happened with this insurance cycle is that new application, my own church hadn't done an application in over 10 years, and suddenly they were asked for one. There's been an underwriting cycle for the last year. The final batch should have been December renewals, so there's still December renewals that some people don't have because there are applications outstanding or things are slowed down. But with the March renewal, and then ideally we will have a brand new set, a full updated set of underwriting data to move into this new service model.
Okay. Heather's wondering about the credit card that was discussed in January.
Yes, Andy Spears has been doing a fair bit of work on that. That is one of the items we plan to report on in March. We do have a deal with the, however you say that, Cary, C-A-A-R-Y, people for churches that have larger ongoing bank balances. We have a more or less free credit card option, but we're pushing right now to have an option for any congregation in the country, and that might entail some kind of national guarantee or something. But I'm hoping that Andy and I will have more on that in March.
Okay. I'm going to call time. I'm aware of this birthday party, and it's there will be more opportunities to continue to ask these questions and get another update when we gather again next month. So many thanks to Clyde and to Eric for making yourselves available on a monthly basis. I think coming out on your partner's birthday is over and beyond, but we're glad you're here and grateful for your attention to all of us, Eric and Clyde. It's great to work with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, friends, for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month.
Thanks everybody. And Steve, we won't do a breakout tonight. I'm heading out.
That's fine. Enjoy.
Get going.